All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And just for the record, this is the October 17th meeting of the Senate, 2018. So we're going to start out with some introductory remarks from myself, then from President Schill, and I believe Maria Gallegos is also, I haven't confirmed that with her, so if she shows up, we'll ask her to speak also. And then we have the main item of business is the online sports marketing proposal, or sorry, management proposal. And so we'll have a presentation from them and then a chance for questions and answers. And then there are just a few other sort of fairly quick items on the agenda. So let me move to my introductory remarks. I want to talk, first of all, about some improvements in transparency that the administration has recently implemented. So, Bettina, if you could go to the IR website. So, as most of you know, the university has an institutional research division office. And if you haven't checked out their website lately, you really should do that. It has a lot of very interesting data about the university. They've recently added a page on the operational metrics of the university, of the colleges, and even down to the department level. So these are the metrics. These are not research productivity metrics, which we all despise. These are operational metrics about the university's budget and the budget of these colleges and units. So I'm going to have Bettina kind of walk you through this in an effort to encourage people to do more. You click on that operational metrics tag. You have to log in using your university ID. And then you get this page. And so if you go down, there's a explanation, and then there's a page for the university as a whole. And Bettina, if you could click on that, and then blow that up a little bit, or a lot. You'll see, a PDF that starts off like this, and it's very useful. As you can see, it's got 5 years of time series data going across, and that includes, for example, in line 7 that you can see there, these are the total expenditures coming through the budgeting process, divided by the total number of student credit hours that in this case, it's the university that the university is teaching. So if you go, over to the right, you can see that on average, university units are spending $260 per student credit hour. If you go down, you see some more information. Some of this takes some digesting. I'm not going to walk through it in detail, but some very interesting basic stuff on the number of degrees per year and so forth. Now that's for the university as a whole. Bettina, if you could go back to that page and then say, go down to economics, just for no particular reason. I'm not an economist. So if you go to the economics department, you can see the similar metrics, broken out at the department level. And again, 5 years of data, which is very useful. And so you can see, again, the total expenditures per student credit hour. So you can also do this at the college level. So you can see, for example, what CAS is spending per credit hour. And very helpfully, they've given the discussion about the potential breakup of CAS, it also includes that data summarized by the current CAS units, natural science, and so forth. So, one of the complaints about the new budget model was that it would lack the transparency that the old budget model had. And I'm very happy to see that that actually we're getting some pretty transparent data from the administration about this. There's a caution on there about this data being for internal use only. I'm fairly sure that's a violation of Oregon Public Records Law, but use it as you'd like is my suggestion. Okay, so I just wanted to say that, and then I wanted to get on to a couple other topics. So you could go back to the agenda, Bettina. So those of you who are in CAS, got an email today about the setup of a task force to study the potential breakup of CAS. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So I think, first there's some good news. The Senate has a CAS caucus, and this is composed of all the senators that are elected from CAS departments. That caucus is now meeting with Dean Marcus monthly, and Bruce Blonigan, the incoming dean, has promised to continue those meetings starting in January when he takes over. At our most recent meeting, which was, I think, Monday, Dean Marcus gave a very frank presentation on his reasons for stepping down and on his thoughts about the potential costs and benefits of a breakup of CAS and the potential for additional reorganizations of other colleges. So you can imagine, for example, that some departments from other colleges might appropriately belong in a new CAS unit. And so I won't go into the details of that discussion, but those of you who are CAS senators and who weren't at that meeting, I really encourage you to attend those because I think that you'll learn a lot. These are not, it's not a polemic from Andrew. I mean, he's got a very balanced view of what's happening and I think very helpful for us as we take up this question of reorganization as a Senate. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news is that at our last Senate meeting, Provost Banovar assured us that the Senate will have a say in the discussion of any potential breakup, if not in the actual decision itself, which the argument is that that's an administrative decision that won't affect academic matters. Maybe a stretch. But at 2 o'clock today, 10 minutes before the email to CAS went out, I got a call from Melanie Munzer, who's the assistant vice provost, who's also the Senate liaison, and she told me that the makeup of the committee had already been decided, that the email would go out in 10 minutes, and that it would, among other things, it would be led by Karen Ford, and there's a list of the not the members, they haven't been appointed yet, but a list of the categories in which the membership will fall. So, Bettina, if you could go to that. That's the one that is the PDF file. No, the one that the link did work. Yeah, that task force one, that one. Thanks. So, so those of you who are CAS senators have got that message from the provost's office, and I forwarded it on to everyone because I think it concerns everyone. And I'll just say that I'm extremely unhappy about the fact that this only 2 of the 9 faculty members of this task force will be appointed in consultation with the Senate. At least 2 is the actual language. But given the promises that have been made about this being an inclusive process with lots of consultation, it's just unacceptable to me that the elected Senate, and in particular the CAS caucus, should not have a majority position on this task force, at least in terms of the faculty membership of it. And so I'm going to push for that. I believe that those members should be elected by the CAS caucus, or at least a majority of them. And I think that that is necessary in order to fulfill the promises that have been made to us about this process being transparent and, one that we as a Senate, an elected Senate, are really involved in. Okay. So I wanted to say that, and I will work with Karen and the provost and president to try to make sure that that happens, and that that this document is modified to make that explicit how that will be done. Okay, I think that's important for this. I think that's important going forward. Be happy to answer any questions about that, but I assume that President Schill will address this in his comments, and that might be a better time about it, because everything I know I learned 45 minutes ago. All right? Yes, Terry. Yeah.
The breakdown of the committee will be in terms of categories of committee members. I think that's at the bottom.
Keep going down, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll note also that it's a little strange how it's done, but there's a subcommittee to deal with financial questions that will be chaired by Brad Shelton and will include one member of this larger committee, which is kind of a weird way to set up a subcommittee, but whatever. That's not my main concern. My main concern is making sure that we have faculty representation through the normal shared governance processes. All right. Then last thing I want to say is just a brief word about the retreat that will happen 2 weeks from now. I'm very excited about this. Elizabeth and Melanie have spent a good deal of time on the phone with Carol Cartwright, who will be facilitating that. I know that she has contacted some of you and some of the administration as well about the potential topics and organization of that retreat. So that meeting will start with a vote on the SPM proposal that we'll discuss today. I hope that will be quick and that we can spend the majority of the time in that retreat. That will not be recorded. It will not be broadcast, and we'll set up the room with sort of the standard retreat kind of thing with tables and so forth. No. So we'll also. I don't think technically we can close this meeting, but my hope is that it will be limited to senators and some administrators that we'll invite. And then at the end, about 15 minutes, about 4:45, we'll invite additional members of the administration to come, and we'll kind of give a quick summary of what was discussed in it. It's a quick retreat. I mean, it's going to end up to be like an hour and a half. So we're going to get some stuff out on the table, I hope, but I think we're also going to need to set up some processes to make sure that there's follow-through on the things that come up, and so we're committed to make sure that happens. Okay. All right. So President Schill, I think it's your turn.
So this is my first Senate meeting of the year because I wasn't able to be at the last or your first meeting, but I want to welcome everybody back. It was great to see the majority of you last night at Treetops, and I'm looking forward to working with you this year. The Senate's jurisdiction, as all of you know, is academic matters as commonly understood, quote unquote. This year, we have a number of meaty academic matters that you all are going to be working on with us, and that including core ed reform, teaching evaluations, program reviews, and advancing new programs or changing how programs are delivered, such as the discussion that you're going to have on sports product management. So there's a bunch of work that is right in the core area of academic matters that we're going to be working on together, and I hope we make really good progress on. There's also a number of areas that aren't strictly academic matters that we work with the Senate on, either because of history or because they touch on academic matters. They're tangential. Some of them are a little more than tangential. And we have decided that it makes sense to be working with the Senate on those. For example, Kaz Mosley and Elizabeth Skowron are going to be working. They're going to be jointly chairing a task force on conflict of interest rules, which is going to be getting up and running shortly. Then, in addition, we're going to soon be launching a committee which is going to look at how we commemorate and celebrate our history as a diverse community on campus. And in particular, this is coming out of, I believe, a Senate resolution last year, or at least a discussion that we had last year, will examine what we can do to add to existing statues and monuments on campus to better reflect the contributions to our heritage of the many diverse populations on campus. We already have one group which is working on Dede Hall, but we want to look more broadly at other parts of the university. And so this is, we're going to name that committee fairly soon. And then thirdly, we've already done some work with Senate, and we'll do more on policies governing romantic relationships and also proscribed discrimination on campus. If all of you remember, when we went through the mandatory reporting rules, was it maybe 2 years ago, there was this category, Bill talked about it, I believe at the last meeting, of racial discrimination, other types of discrimination, that we needed to go back and change those rules and come up with something that's consistent with law. And so we're going to be doing that. So that's another area. So all those are pretty big topics. Committees will be working on many of them. So I noticed on the agenda today there was an item listed as TPM free speech restrictions. And I'm not sure exactly what you're going to be discussing. I have a pretty good idea. And I just want to make a comment on that. So over the past couple of years, universities have been re-examining their time, place, and manner rules in an effort to protect the rights of all to be heard in a manner that doesn't create undue disruption to safety of people on the campus. The tragedy, whenever I go to a president's meeting, this is always number one on the list, in particular after Charlottesville and after the person was killed during the protest and counter-protest in Charlottesville. So as a university, we need to protect free speech, and at the same time we need to protect our students from violence. The university at present doesn't have a comprehensive policy on time, place, and manner, although we do have a policy on facilities scheduling. That policy requires the head of event scheduling, someone over in the EMU, to quote-unquote maintain and post on the UO website a manual of procedures and other rules that will guide the operational procedures, quote, end of quote, for event scheduling. That's sort of what we're supposed to be doing. Rick Hout at the EMU is the person in charge of this, and over the summer he posted it. He had been operating for quite a long time on a set of unwritten rules, and so what we told him to do is, in order to guarantee that we had viewpoint neutrality, is to actually put them up on the web. Now, for the most part, those guidelines were the same as what he had been doing all along. There was a change in one practice, and that was following what many schools are doing. I think Berkeley was one of the first, and then what they did was too draconian, and I think there was a court case, and then they've come back with something else. But what a lot of schools are doing is requiring a minimum number of days of notice for any space. So when someone tries to reserve a space, they have to give some notice when there's going to be a large crowd. So for what we did is we established this threshold of, if you have more than 300 people, you have to have 28 days of notice. And the idea is for us to have the time to make sure that we have the right safety mechanisms in place. We need to have the right police, the right the right security, and maybe an opportunity for counter-programming for another group, so as to keep parties away from each other if they choose to be away from each other. The events, we were concerned 28 days. Someone suggested, well, what happens if, let's say we were 3 years earlier, President Obama decided to visit, would we say, okay, you can't come because you haven't given us 28 days of notice? So we allow for a shorter time frame if we can make reasonable preparations during that time period. Also, if someone passes away and we want to have a vigil, which we've done, unfortunately, for some of our students, we allow for a reduction in the time. So I understand that Bill and I have talked about this, that the Senate might want to establish a task force on the matter. I'd be happy to have the administration participate in such a task force, but only if the task force looks comprehensively at all of our time, place, and manner rules on campus. Because remember, this is just a piece of a much bigger set of issues, and I would want to look at everything. Our students, particularly our students of color, our Jewish students, and the LGBTQ students, they have been asking, they were quite articulate coming before the Senate a number of times last year. They have been asking for us to ensure their safety over and over again. That is one of the reasons why we established the advanced time periods for booking of physical spaces. So I think that a comprehensive examination of all of our rules should be should bear in mind that request. How are we going to make the campus safe for all of our students, and at the same time preserve free speech rights for all? So it's a complicated set of issues. It's sort of a difficult set of issues. I think that if I went around the room, I'd probably find, I don't know, if there's 50 people here, I'd probably find 35 different viewpoints about what is the right thing to do there. But it's something I think that's worth doing, and I'd invite you to think about doing that, and we'll be your ready partners on that. So let me mention briefly, Bill mentioned the task force on the structure of CAS. So Giant and I will be appointing a task force, as Bill mentioned, this fall. The memo that came out today for CAS members, people who are in the CAS, went through how the selection of folks for that will occur. The essential task is to look at the pros and cons of different structures, including one, the current structure, where all three divisions are together. A second structure, which would be a structure where you would have two separate colleges, humanities and social sciences together, and the natural sciences separate. And then a third structure, which would be each of the colleges a separate independent college. And what we want is we want this task force with no preconceptions to begin. I don't have any, money in the game at the moment. I mean, I don't know which one is the one that's my favorite. I want to learn, and I want to learn what the community wants. I also want to learn what makes sense and what the pros and cons are. We're not asking the task force to make a recommendation. We're asking the task force to analyze the issue. Now, for those of you who got the memo, and you're certainly welcome to, I think you sent it on to everybody, so everybody's got the memo. I set forth like 4 questions, and there's probably 100 questions, but I set 4 that came to my mind. And one was, what are the trade-offs among the 3 organizational structures? What do we gain, what do we lose by moving from one structure to the next? Secondly, does the current structure of CAS impede the ability of any of its component parts to achieve academic excellence? Does the current structure create a problem for some units? If so, which parts and how? And would any changes short of a structural change solve those problems? So if you have a set of problems, you might be able to solve it without something as drastic as changing the college structure. But we need to know that, and I want them to look at that. Thirdly, third question in my mind would be, would a division of CAS such as described in the options 2 or 3 that I gave you, either social sciences, humanities together, natural sciences separate, all 3 separate, would it reduce opportunities for interdisciplinary work and collaboration? And if so, what incentives could we provide if we were to go down that route to make sure that we didn't lose those opportunities for people to work at the intersections of disciplines? Lastly, what would be the monetary cost of dividing CAS into 2 or 3 colleges? Can we afford it as a university? Very, very important, the memo states this, we're not doing this to save money. I mean, that is not the consideration here. At the same time, we can't do it even if we all decide that it's the right thing. If it's so cost prohibitive, then we won't be able to do it. So we really need some good estimates. That's why we have the separate subcommittee. And the subcommittee, the reason why it's not, because I agree, calling it a subcommittee when it's only one person and people who aren't on the subcommittee, it's not probably Karen would have problems, although she did allow the language go by, would have problems with that. But the idea is those are going to be sort of the technical people that we're going to draw on the finance people from the various colleges to help us run the numbers and provide expert advice to the task force. So again, Karen once again has stepped forward. Karen, are you here? I don't see you. But Karen, as all of you know, has stepped forward many times into very, very difficult situations. She did an amazing job last year as acting dean of the, or interim dean of the Clark Honors College. And when we came back to her this year and said, would you do this? She didn't hesitate, and she said, sure. And I'm very, very grateful for her doing this. I think she is someone who, she's not the only person on our faculty, but she is certainly someone who has shown that people trust her from a variety of different disciplines all across the university. So 20 members are going to be selected, was up there a moment ago. And as I said, at least 2 of the faculty members will be selected from a list that is provided by Elizabeth and Bill. And I want to emphasize it's at least 2. It could be more. But we wanted to make a commitment that at least 2 would be there. At least 2 or 3 are going to be NTTF faculty. Also, we have CAS faculty, as well as academic leadership outside of CAS, because one of the parts of the charge is it may be, as Bill said, you want to pull in something into CAS, which is now sitting outside. So this affects the whole university. So we want to have some outside representatives. We want to have students. The idea here is we wanted to have an inclusive process. We want to hear all of the viewpoints of people without prior commitments. And so that's important to me. And, to the point that Bill made, one of the reasons why we didn't say you can have X number of, appointments, a majority or something like that, we want to balance the whole committee. We want to make sure that we have the right gender balance, right, balance of faculty of color. We want to make sure of different divisions, different disciplines. That actually is very hard when you cement yourself into one group saying it's these people. So we want to have flexibility. It's also an advisory committee to me and the provost. And so I want to make sure that it has people that I know who's on it, and that the people are people who will command the respect of the entire university should, for whatever they decide. So in any event, but as I said, it's at least 2, could be more than 2. Depends on the names that Elizabeth and Bill propose. Let me mention just a couple more things, and I'll sit down. Student success. As all of you know, this has been a very high priority of mine, and I'm not alone among college presidents, and I know you have the same feelings. That's why we're here. We're here to make sure that the students can succeed here, can graduate hopefully on time, and go off to wonderful lives. So toward the end of last year, I announced that we were going to pay for an additional 25 academic advisors and career advisors for the new Tyson Hall. They're right now getting ready to hire the first wave of advisors. They're not going to hire them all at once because, obviously we want to make sure that we can hire really great people. And they're going to be critical to our efforts to make sure that students graduate on time with good advice and then get launched into careers that they will help them live fulfilling lives. This commitment is going to be in addition to resources that I made available my first year as president, and very, very important. Now, some of you have asked, what has been the results so far of those? And, it's hard to do this because a lot of this is baked in for years, because when you talk about, if you use graduation rates as your metric, you have to go back 4 to 6 years which is before I was here and before any of this sort of thing happened. But if you look back 4 years, if you go to our 4-year graduation rate, when I came, we were hovering around 48%. We're up to about 56%. So that was a significant improvement. That year was an unusually well-qualified class that on admission scores. And so, but we've seen progress. I've looked at we haven't gotten week 4 data. I think that's this week. I think it's Friday. So week 4 data is how we look at who's back and what our current enrollment is. I will say that I've seen some early data, and it's suggesting that we may have slipped back a little bit on our retention rates. And so I've asked undergraduate studies, I've asked other folks to get to the bottom of it. It is conceivable that will change when we get final week 4 data, but I don't think it will. But we want to understand what happened. You know, we haven't made these investments yet, but still we want the trajectory to be always positive. Sometimes it might be like this on graduation rates, but that's the early warning that we've gotten. Budget. I have 2 more topics, budget and fundraising, and then I'll sit down. Next year, unfortunately, is a PERS year. Now, unfortunately, some of you know what I mean, which you probably wish you didn't. In addition to our usual cost increases, we expect to be assessed by the state an additional $8 or $9 million in recurring expenses to help pay for our share of the unfunded state retirement liability. This extraordinary increase in costs is set to occur every 2 years. So we've already had one. Last year we had was it last year? This year, I think, we had a $7 million charge. Next year we will have, let me just get this right. The biennium is next year, so it's the following year. We will have a $8 million charge to $9 million, and then we expect 2 more of those at least. And that is assuming there's no recession, and that is assuming that, we're supposed to earn stock market returns of 7% per year. So we'll see whether it's only 4 biennium. But when you add that all together, what you're talking is 9 times, let's say it's 8. 8 times 3 is 24, and then add another 6. That's $30 million a year that we're going to be spending on PERS, in addition to all of our increasing labor costs and healthcare costs. And, the way I refer to this when I meet with the trustees or when I meet with our foundation board is it's a train wreck. It's a train wreck for the whole state. But I focused on the University of Oregon. So we have to manage our way through this. And it's not going to be easy. And so one of the things that we are hoping is that the state will take actions to fix PERS. That is probably going to be very difficult for the state to do, given the structure of politics in the state. It's also going to be very difficult to do given law. The Supreme Court throughout the last PERS, either reform or whatever you want to call it if you didn't like it. And so I'm assuming, unfortunately, that we're probably not going to fix PERS. Then the question is, well, what do you do? So what we're going to do is we're lobbying the governor and Salem legislators for additional money. We're asking them for $130 million for all of the 7 universities, and that will allow us to keep, what we've said is that will allow us to keep tuition increases below 5%. However, who knows, that higher education is not showing up high in the list of priorities for either the current governor, or her opponent this year. So who knows whether we'll be able to do that. But we're anticipating working with faculty, with our unions, with our students, to all make the case that this will have hardships if we don't. We can manage costs. We can reduce expenses. That has consequences. We've already reduced expenses. We're already operating the university at about less than 70% of the expenses that our peer schools have. So that hurts and would be very difficult. We can increase the enrollment of undergraduates, and that's what we're planning on doing. That, and in particular, non-resident undergraduates, because they actually are generating income for the university. I mean, you all understand that each resident student costs significantly more for us to educate than they contribute in tuition, and the non-resident students generate income for the university that we use to cross-subsidize. And the last thing in this group of initiatives, and I'm always open to other people's ideas, is increasing tuition. And that obviously is the route that the state has taken. And that's a hard one because our out-of-state tuition is at market. So we can't really go up much more there. So it's going to be based upon a relatively small base, which is about half of our students, and a relatively, we have about $11,000 tuition number. And so you get pretty large increases if you have to fix the problems that we're going to have. We're hoping that won't be the case. This year, I think we raised tuition by about 2.6%, following the previous year, which was a high increase. And so I fear that we could be in that situation, that every other year when we have a PERS year, we have this ridiculous tuition increase that gets the students upset, gets us upset, gets the legislature upset, gets the HEC upset. A lot of upset. So hopefully that won't be the world that we're living in, but we're about ready to start that cycle. Lastly, talk about the campaign. So we have a campaign goal of, as all of you know, $2 billion. When I got here, I thought that was a crazy goal. I sat down with our development vice president, and I said, how the hell did you get this number? And he told me, I still thought it was a crazy goal. But luckily, we're closing in on it. So right now we're about $1.87 billion. We're going to hit the campaign goal sometime this year. And what we decided to do was we decided to extend the campaign, add another $1 billion onto the campaign. And I want to give you just a sense of how it's divided. So we asked all the deans of the various schools, what are your priorities? What do you think you can raise? What do you want to do in your schools? And we got, roughly about 180 million of priorities from the deans. We really want to reshape our fundraising this year to focus on student success. So Pathway Oregon student success, we're going to try to raise $100 million to $250 million for those endeavors. Pathway Oregon, as all of you know, is a free tuition and fees for Pell-eligible students, and it costs us a ton of money. So we have about $6 million a year is in Pathway Oregon. The only amount that comes out of the endowment is about $800 million. So, 800,000. And so we're paying a lot of money from operating resources. Basically what we're doing is we're redistributing tuition from out-of-state students to low-income Oregonians, which of course is part of our mission as a university, is to educate Oregonians and to make sure we're an access institution. That said, if we can push some of that onto philanthropy, then we can have those resources either to expand our scholarships or to do other things that I mentioned. Knight Campus is about $500 million. And that may sound, wow, that's a lot. That's going to be all your fundraising. The Knight Campus is really going to come from a very limited number of donors, very limited. We're not even assigning a fundraiser to the Knight Campus in terms of a full-time fundraiser. So we know who will give to the Knight, who we're hoping will give to the Knight Campus. There's a program called the Presidential Science Initiative, which is a set of things that we've already been fundraising for. Data sciences, which is going to be actually all through the university, microbiome research, material science, neuroscience. somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $100 million. We have a classroom building that we're going to build on one of 3 locations, which we're currently talking to people about. That will, at the moment, we're targeting that for environmental and sustainability, and that will be somewhere, we'll raise about $25 million out of a total of $60 million cost. Athletics, which will be including Hayward Field, they'll try to raise something like $275 million. And humanities and social science initiatives that we're talking about right now, somewhere between $10 and $50 million, in addition to what's being proposed by the deans of the various schools. So we got a lot of things, a lot of work. Now, some of you know that we've moved a handful of development officers from some of the schools and colleges centrally. And I just wanted to explain to you why we did that. So if you look at the goals for the extension of the campaign, I'm going to be centrally in charge of raising about 40% of the goal if you take away the night campus, which is, again, not going to be, it's not going to really absorb a lot of fundraiser activity. So that's about $200 million. On the other hand, so if I have 40% of the goal, I only have at the moment 16% of the fundraisers. So we needed additional people to move in and start raising money for Pathway Oregon, for student success initiatives, for the classroom building, and for some of the science initiatives, although we already had somebody on that. And so what we've done is we've reallocated about 4 or 5 people over to the center. And, you know, some of the deans didn't like it. Some of the deans said fine. But that's what we've done. And that's just how you make the numbers work. So overall, that's the end of my prepared comments. Bill, I know that I took maybe a little longer than it took you to talk about the history of treetops. But does anybody have any questions about anything? Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I understand correctly the issue with PERS. So at some previous time, we were required to pay an extra $8 million or something per year from then on to support it.
No,
Is that right?
so, well, I mean, I'm not sure how I would describe it. Bill is actually a little more of an expert on the economics of it, but there's an unfunded liability. The state
yes.
has committed that it's going to get to 100% by a certain date. I don't know when that is. It set a number of assumptions about what the return is going to be on investments in PERS. And then what it's done is it's allocated a rateable proportion to all of the employers of PERS benefits. And our rateable proportion, based upon the assessments that we get, will be an additional, this is in addition to all we're already paying on PERS, is an addition. We did an extra 7 last year, and we'll do an extra 8.5, 8 this year.
Yeah, but so when you say an extra 7 last year, that's a one-time extra 7, or that's
continuing.
I'm sorry.
It accumulates.
It accumulates.
Every year.
Okay, so that extra 7 is then every year, and then this extra 8 that's coming this time is added to that, and also continues every year.
Right.
So we're eventually looking at something like 30 or more million extra per year, and
Right.
until some unknown time when PERS is actually fully funded.
Well, if it's some unknown time, if it's even further, it'll be more than 30 million. I mean, it'll just keep going. But
Okay, so,
yeah.
so essentially, if it's not being fully funded, and then there's something going to keep adding to this.
If the current way of doing it at the state goes on, now Bill has suggested, at least to me, that what they should do is maybe borrow money or extend. Like if you have a mortgage, right, and you're paying everything, your principal off very quickly, you have very big payments. If you extend the principal, if you extend the time, the amortization period, you reduce your payments.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I
they haven't
understand
said they want to do that
the
yet.
current, what's happening now and expected to happen under current planning.
And there may be a bargain.
Yeah, okay.
Although I don't think I'm going to live that long, but there could be a bargain where they agree to extend the amortization period if they take some actions which are going to be anathema to some people in this room, like, I think that there's a special PERS pickup or something where it used to be that the employee made the 6% payment, and then somewhere along the line the state agreed to pay it, state employers did, and they're going to try to push that back. So there's a whole series of things that are being proposed.
No, but I think I understand the situation now. So
Right.
just trying to get the basics of what you described correct.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome. Yeah.
So this has to do with CAS reorganization. Both you and Bill mentioned the possibility of bringing in programs from the professional schools under this umbrella. Is there any option at all being considered of making, what some schools have, a College of the Arts that would pull in music, dance, visual art programs from the College of Design, that sort of thing?
So there was language in the charge that we sent out that said I think it says or vice versa. So it's pulling in or it's taking out, but it also suggests maybe pulling in. I don't think that we've asked the task force to think about an entirely different school that would pull out from everywhere. Pull out from music, pull out from this. Right. We haven't asked them to do that.
No.
President Schill is an academic advisor looking at this from an academic advising perspective. I just wanted to point out some inherent tension that that I think exists between increased out-of-state recruitment, that pool, and student success in terms of retention. And I just look forward to there being some really robust discussions about this. We talk about it a lot in our office. Just bringing in more students from out of state, particularly if they're not qualified, possibly can't really afford to be here, doesn't really mean that we're going to retain them easily, even with 23 new advisors. So I just look forward to being part of, I think a lot of us in our work look forward to being part of discussions about how we improve the quality of student services, campus climate, all that, to actually keep those new students that we're attracting here.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really tough. When I see students, so part of it is exacerbated by our financial aid practices. So what we do is we have a very low discount rate compared to our peer schools, and we put almost all of it into state students, not out-of-state students. So when you see students who are low-income students from out of state here, my concern is I want to make sure they're getting appropriate information at the front end so they understand the situation, because the last thing I want to do is harm a student and bring them in and have them not see that they're going to run out of money in a year. Because we're not able to provide, we're not providing it, and the tuition is almost three times as much. So now, it does create a weird situation in our school where the out-of-state students and the international students tend to be much more affluent on average than our in-state students. But I'm not sure there's a better way of doing it in a state that's decided that it doesn't want to fund higher education. It allows you to at least do that. But you're right. I mean, I am somewhat concerned about that. And I see examples of that. There is a divergence in the groups, but it's the people who get the wrong information I'm concerned about. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, President Schill. And then I'd like to ask Mary Glejos to talk a little bit about, she's the ASUO president, and she'll talk a little bit about what's up with the ASUO, and I think with a particular focus on how the Senate might work with them. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Try to be fast since we're a little over time. But my name is Maria. I use she, her, hers, and they, them, their pronouns. I am the president of the Associated Students of University of Oregon. That's our student government, for those of you that are new. I guess a little bit about myself, just so I'm not just this student that came and talked to you for a half second. I'm an ethnic studies major with a minor in women and gender studies and environmental studies. I'm a fourth-year student, and I'm really feeling week 4 right now. All my midterm papers were due this week, so glad that y'all talk and plan it right at the same time. Anywho, some of our kind of broader goals is we're working on food insecurity. We're rolling out some food alleviation programs that we actually partnered with President Schill's office. So hopefully y'all are keeping an eye on that, letting your students know about that. For tuition, we're also going to be lobbying down in the state capitol, aiming for like a brave goal of $1 billion and then to a safer goal of $130 million to try and stay under 5%. And then partnering that with also fundraising for scholarships. So I'm also working with President Schill's office on that. And also, which I believe this does involve senators from Faculty Senate, is we're looking to kind of reform the student code of conduct process, which I believe there's usually a few of you who are appointed to that committee to try and bring some sort of student panel back to disciplinary hearings. There's a lot more information on that, but I think that last year that was an ongoing issue that our committee worked on, which y'all were really helpful on, and I believe that's going to be a reoccurring theme this year since the Board of Trustees did not vote on it at all. And then 2 kind of smaller goals that I think will be really helpful for Faculty Senate to at least discuss is 1, our accessibility advocate. I have a cabinet of team members who get to work with different student groups as a liaison, and one thing that we're hearing a lot from students with disabilities, learning disabilities, and just like other kind of like mental health orgs is that a lot of times on syllabuses, when you look at the part for like students with disabilities, it usually just says go to the office in Oregon Hall. One of the things that I would like to see is potentially mandate new syllabuses to include other resources, or at least that the professors are knowledgeable. So things like having the Accessibility Student Union on there, the Counseling Center, the Duck Nest. There is an array of resources that students kind of miss because they're not all centralized. And I mean, the part that students do have to interact with the university is in class. So it would be helpful to get that on our syllabuses, and I look forward to talking to y'all about that. And then another kind of potentially a resolution or some sort, at least of like communal understanding, would be to start implementing kind of like maybe like a tradition of mentioning at new events that we host, whether this is a department event or a week of welcome event, but acknowledging that we're on stolen tribal ground. In Canada, that is a mandated thing for public universities to say at opening of ceremonies. It's really not that controversial. The U.S. has not necessarily caught on to that, but I think the U of O has had a lot of great strides in recognizing indigeneity on our campus, and I think this is something that we can push forward through here, and like be faculty and students aligned. This is something that the Native American Student Union has been working on, and I'm trying to make sure that we are bringing these issues more to light. That's all I have for you right now. Is there any questions? All righty. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thank you. So then next on the agenda is the sports product marketing presentation. So if y'all could come forward, and if Bettina, if you could bring up the PowerPoint for this. So I want to just a quick reminder, we're not going to vote on this today. This is going to go to the graduate council. They will make a report and a recommendation to us, and we will vote at it right before at the beginning of the retreat meeting. So I believe the format is that you're going to go through a PowerPoint on it, and I think people should hold their questions during that, and then we'll go through the actual proposal, and that would be the appropriate time for questions. Okay, thanks. You might want to introduce yourself. Sorry.
Well, thank you, President Harbaugh. My name is Robin Clement. I'm a senior lecturer at the Lundquist College of Business, and I'm also the academic director of the Sports Product Management Master's Program. And so I'd like to just briefly talk about the program itself and what it does, and then talk about why we believe that a new delivery mode, continuing to have the on-site mode, which is in Portland, but adding an online delivery to it will be beneficial to the university and will help people in this industry be able to excel. And so, first of all, I'd like to, so I just want to make clear that this is the program is a Master in Sports Product Management. It's not a marketing degree. Marketing is included in it, but as part of this entire system that I will be talking about. And it's the only, oops, is this working? Oh. And it's the only sports product management master's in the world. So it's a very unique program. And we believe that we launched it in 2015, and we were the first one, and we continue to lead the industry. And we'll talk a little bit about that on-site program and then talk about how we would like to bring it online. So we have the first sports product management masters in the world. This past summer, we put on a 4-week certificate program for executives. And so this particular proposal is really the third leg of that stool to really try to dominate this particular part of education. If we look at the curriculum itself, it really is interdisciplinary. So it has an experiential and theoretical basis. So the experiential is there's an integrated project that groups work on, their own business idea all the way through from the beginning of the program to the end of the program. And during that time, there are certain deliverables. And at the end, they will have a product that they could actually market and sell. So they're learning by doing how to actually create a sports product and construct it as well as market it. In addition, we have traditional types of delivery and lectures. It's interdisciplinary because we have about half non-business and half business in the curriculum. So some of the science and non-business courses include human physiology, green chemistry, design, and topics like that. And obviously about half is business, so accounting and marketing and management and legal aspects of sport. So it's a interdisciplinary program, and it's delivered. We have people who are part of the Lundquist College who deliver it, as well as other colleges, but we have a large group of practitioners who are extremely experienced in who also deliver the program. In terms of, we've graduated 2 classes. In 2017, that class had 100% placement. There were 37 students. And in 2018, there were 50 students and 92% placement. Also, we offer, it's not a required internship, but we work with the students and with companies to match them. And there has been thus far 100% placement for paid internships over the summer, and with 40 international companies. And as we can see, 41 companies have hired our students. So this is a very successful program. It provides a lot of value to these students, and they get placed in the industry. So we think that there's a strategic opportunity here to bring this program online. And we also recognize that there's a huge market demand for this type of product with 900 sports product companies in Oregon and Washington alone. It's an international type of international industry. We think that there are some threats that we want to get ahead of. There are some programs starting to develop. Some of them are master's MBAs that are adding this sort of sports product, outdoor product type of coursework in there. So we want to lead, just as we led 4 years ago. And we think that we have strategic advantages, such as we're the market leader, we're the first ones. We have a really unique content that has been developed in cooperation with the industry. We have proven instructors, both the Lundquist as well as industry people that work with our students. We think the location, which is a hub of the sports product industry, is an advantage. We have a unique innovation lab that actually students have hands-on experience creating some of these products. And we have strong relationships with all of the sports product industry and HR managers. So not only, we think that could be a source of identifying people to come into this online program, plus placement and internships. So when we were considering this, there was no other program to look at. So what we decided to do is to look at MBA programs that are online, high-ranked ones, and look at what they do to be successful. And so Carnegie Mellon is ranked number 1 on online education, their MBA, and we actually contacted them, and they were very gracious to share what they do. And so their format is really a hybrid format. They have synchronous, which is live through the internet lectures. They have asynchronous, which is taped, as well as other discussion boards, other types of delivery. And then they have on-site. And so we have mirrored those 3 in this program, and we think it will allow us to have the same quality of program as we do on site. So our proposal is to have the same program, and I'll show you a brief worksheet that shows that it's the same number of credits, same contact hours, etc., but a new delivery mode using the state-of-the-art synchronous, asynchronous, and on-site residencies. It'll be the same program, but a new student market. So we will be able to actually deliver this program to working individuals, so they don't have to quit their job, they don't have to come to Portland, and we potentially internationally, which we believe that market will be quite large. And the same instructors. So we have commitments from many of our instructors to actually take what they do on site and deliver it online. So we believe that that will help maintain quality and consistency across the program. So this chart is in your proposal, where we have the on-site program with course credits of 65, and the online program will have 65, the same courses. And you can see the classroom hours and the engagement hours will be the same. So this will be the same program, but bringing it online as opposed to on-site. Okay, and so these are some of the examples of types of activities in each of these buckets. And particularly the on-site learning is pretty exciting from my perspective. So this is the system of sports product management. So we start out, they'll come to Portland for an on-site orientation. They're their groups will be, their teams will actually have been pre-selected. They'll meet each other. They'll start getting introduced to the lab. They'll meet industry people and also have some lectures. In the first 2 terms, they'll learn product ideation. So some of the classes are human physiology, sports product branding, and marketing research. After that, after 2 terms, they'll come into Portland and do an on-site product brief. So the team has worked on that during those 2 terms. We'll have industry leaders basically be there at their presentations, as well as the professors, and give them feedback on their product briefs. The next 2 terms is product design, so that they will take additional courses in green materials, as well as cost accounting and other types of things that are courses that are necessary to actually understand product design. And during that time, they will actually come up with what is called a tech pack. So that's basically is this particular product going to be designed. That tech pack will be sent to factories in Asia and be worked on there. And when they arrive in Asia for their 7-day trip, they'll actually get to see what the tech pack, the production of what they produced, they sent in the tech pack. And my understanding is usually they are not exactly what they had envisioned. So they start learning that process. Then they move to sourcing and supply chain for 2 terms, have an on-site product plan that's presented, marketing and management for 2 terms, on-site marketing plan. And what's neat about this program and why we want it to start in spring is they will actually be on site and graduate with all the other SPM students, the on-site group. So that will be really a fun time, and they'll get to celebrate together. So how do we do this? How do we make sure that our faculty are trained and are capable of producing the quality that we want? Well, we have an instructional designer who is helping all of the instructors convert their on-site courses to online courses. In addition to having a meeting with that instructional designer one-on-one, they will also be taking courses, or a course with Quality Matters, which is a nationally recognized or internationally recognized standard and provider of training for online instruction. They will then, working with the designer, adjust their syllabi to have the synchronous, asynchronous, and on-site. The course will be designed for online. We'll have video production. We've purchased high-quality production equipment. We have hired a high-quality videographer to do that, and then there will be course testing and review, and we'll cycle through that. The whole point is continuous improvement. So this type of cycle will continue through the entire program and continue in the future. After a couple of times of presenting these courses, we will seek Quality Matters certification for each course. Our faculty, I think we've really tried to support our faculty in this development. 95% overlap with our online SPM, at least at this point. We have compensation for both teaching and online course development, so they're being paid to actually convert their courses to online, as well as they will be paid to teach it online. We have an instructional designer that will help them with the design and also with their presence. So we believe that this type of package and being really attentive to what our faculty needs is critical for this to be a successful effort. And student services. We have excellent student services for the on-site program, and we recognize that's critical to be successful online. So registration obviously is critical. Advising, we'll make sure that we have people available to talk to each student to make sure that they're progressing well. There'll be a lot of industry engagement and tech support, both through PDX, Portland, and Eugene. So we believe that we've thought through, and in the proposal you can see, we've thought through a lot of stuff, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and suggestions so that we can improve this even more. So again, our proposed date is spring of 2019. This program is one of kind of a collection of UO sports programs. It's a very unique program, and we are leading now, and we want to continue. So thank you, Bill.
Thanks very much, Robin. So I think now we'll go through the proposal. We don't have to go through every bit of it, but maybe before we start that, we'll have. Is it okay for questions? And then we get to the.
And
yeah.
actually, I thought we have our team from
Yes,
Portland.
please come on up. Come on up,
Who
and if you
have been working on
yeah.
this. So if I can't answer the question, they can.
okay,
So
and maybe you could introduce them before.
I will. Okay, so they're almost all taller than me. This is Danita Sturtelmeyer. Is that close?
Yeah.
Oh, good. This is Ellen Schmidt-Devlin. Ellen actually is a founder of the SBM program and a dynamo. The other dynamo, as well as Danita, is Lindsay Holtz, who has been working day by day on this proposal and working with all of the instructors and everything. So I think we have a good team here to answer your questions. Do you want to call on them? Okay.
This over here.
Hello?
Yes, Chris.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so I've actually got several questions. Let me start with them one at a time. The program has these short residency periods in Portland and so on. And so one thing which I wonder about, and perhaps this is actually being observed that this actually is feasible with the thing which you modeled it on, is that, for example, the people who are from far away are going to have to come to Portland so and so many times, and if, for example, they are participating in this program while working full-time on other jobs, they're going to have to get time off of those other jobs. And is this likely to actually work for the potential students?
Do you want to take that? You can take that? I can take that.
Thank you.
Great question. So we're modeling this off of other online programs, and they asked me to take the question because I'm actually in a PhD program at Case Western Reserve, where I go back once a month for a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we're going to do the same thing with this program, and we believe over a 24-month program, when we're asking them to come into Portland 4 times and go international 1 time, we will announce when they need to come to Portland as they sign up. So when you sign up for the program, you'll see the 5 times that you need to come. So we're hoping that that's enough notice for them. So if they're accepted in the program, that they'll know when they need to come to Portland. They can use that time as vacation time or ask for prior approval to be away from their jobs. So because we're modeling on other programs that require students to come to location, we think that people that are looking at other online programs will be used to that piece of online learning, and we also think it's critical to what we're trying to do. The experiential piece of it is so important, that innovation lab, and to give them access to that, and then also give them access to the industry. And that industry based in Portland will bring them together when we have the students there.
So I wanted to ask one of the questions that came up when you presented this at the Senate Exec last week was about accreditation, and I understand that the entire university is accredited by a federal accreditor, but the business school is accredited by a Association of Business School Accreditors or something like that. So the plan, I'm not sure if it's the plan, but one potential is to exclude the sports product management from that accreditation. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the reasons for that and the likelihood that the university or the college would go ahead and do that.
Yes, so the AACSB, which is our accreditor, for programs that are less than 50% business content, we can ask for an exclusion. So we don't have to include them in that program. And there are reasons that in our program is just under 50% business. So I believe the dean is planning to ask for an exclusion. For our students, that the AACSB is less important than the uniqueness of the program and the quality of the program. So we don't believe it'll have any impact on recruiting. And because we have so many instructors in our program that are industry people, in that accreditation, it really is more focused on scholarly activity and things like that. And so it would be more difficult possibly to get accreditation. We could do it, but it's really not a necessary thing, and the accreditation body actually allows this. Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you. Any additional questions? Then maybe we'll quickly go through the actual proposal. Yes. Sorry, Margaret. Somebody can give you a mic.
How do you deal with language issues? It's very international.
So one of the things that I think the students will know coming in that right now the program is offered in English. However, one of the programs that we're using is called Panopto, and they offer some closed captioning, and that will allow some translation services as well. So we're not going to be focusing on that certainly for the first year, but looking forward, that is something as we're expecting a large international student population for this, is that will give us an opportunity to have closed captioning in alternate languages. Thank you.
Thanks. Chris, you had a question?
So looking in the program description, basically it has the same content as the existing on-site program, but it looked like, I wasn't really sure from what was said, but it looked like the expected tuition to be charged for the online version amounted to a substantially larger total because it was the same tuition per term but spread out over more terms. And somehow that doesn't seem like like the right relative pricing.
Go ahead.
We're fighting over who's going to take that question.
We'll take it. So again, I think what you have to think about is that we actually were modeling that tuition at similar online programs. So Carnegie Mellon is significantly higher than the I think it was 83,000 for and I think 97,000, something like that. That's in the proposal. So we believe that for the convenience, being able to continue to work, as well as the quality of the program, we believe that that the market will bear that. But we recognize that there is no benchmark for this online program. And so we have some scholarship money built into the budget for the first cohort, and we will see how it goes. Right now, the projection is that the payback for the investment is 2 years. If we have to reduce the tuition a little bit, it might take 3 years or so to pay back. But it is net cash flow positive after a couple of years. Did that help answer your question? Okay, great.
Okay, yes.
So for students, you're expecting that these students will be professionals who have jobs, and are you expecting that their companies are going to be paying for their travel costs to and from Portland for the 4 or 5 times, plus that they're going to be paying for their travel costs to and from Asia, because you have the 7 or 8 day trip in Asia? So are you kind of expecting that the companies are going to be paying for this as opposed to students?
We think we're going to, we have on our website right now, if somebody's interested, they can learn more. So we've been communicating with about 150 people that pushed the button to say, I want to learn more about this. And so we've had a chance to talk to some of the people and the companies that they're working for. And I think we're going to be all over the board. We were talking to a gentleman from Microsoft that said his company is going to pay 100%. We were talking to somebody else from the military that said that he can tap into, and he will be scholarship from the military. Well, we've also talked to people from companies that we all know of, Nike, Adidas, and we're hearing closer to $10,000 a year. And since it goes over 3 of their fiscal years, they'll probably be reimbursed if they successfully do this program closer to a $20,000 to $25,000. So we made the decision that when they hit the ground in Portland, we'll take care of everything. But to get there, they'll pay for their own expenses, and where they stay, they'll pay for their own expenses. That will be different in Asia. We'll let them come from wherever they're coming from, but we'll pay on-the-ground expenses in Asia, just because they'll all be together. They'll all be doing the same thing. So yes, there will be the expense of the tuition to come to the program, and then there will be the additional expense on the ground. We will be very transparent about that. It's very typical. I mean, the nice part about us getting to this party a little late is that a lot of other schools have shown us, when they've offered to pay for some of these things, it ends up being logistically very difficult for the school. So pretty soon the school is a travel agent, so we're trying to learn from what's happened every place else as we get into this space. And we think it's a more sustainable model that we're recommending. Good question.
Thank you.
Anthony Hornoff, Computer Information Science. Also, I teach user interfaces. So, in general, I say good job. Trying something new. More power to you. Thanks for working on this. To the extent that you will be teaching the design of physical products, to what extent do you think that can be done remotely? And maybe one way to answer that question is, does Nike have geographically disparate design groups designing its Air Jordans?
I think the greatest challenge we have and our instructors have is to deliver highly engaged or hands-on learning, which is what we're very proud of on the on-site program. One of the ways that we're talking about doing that is really stressing our on-site time, which Ellen talked to you a little bit about. Another way is to use technology, just because you are who you are. We're going to use all we can with the resources and the software that we have with the university. But we are also talking about term kits. So the idea is that our lab instructor is packaging up experiences, materials, fabrics, as an example, and every term each student will receive a kit of parts for the term. So not just cases or textbooks, but also materials or deconstructed products, so that when you're going through product line management, you're actually talking about cost value and touching the fabric as you talk about the price difference. So I think I answered that. Also, while they're on site, we will have 6 hours of lab time together. So they will be in our innovation lab. We'll try to keep it open so that those who really want hands-on making time have the opportunity to do that.
I think you're probably also familiar with the fact that so many of these tools are electronic. So when they're building a design or building a pattern, they're doing that with software. They're being familiarized with the software when they're with us, and then they're using that when they're away from us. The interesting part is that has grown so quickly in the area of creation. And the fact we're not teaching just specifically design, we're teaching the whole creation process. So design is a piece of it. It's an important piece of it. But we believe in that piece of it, there are more electronic tools available today than any place else. So if we use Nike as an example, yes, they design products around the world. They make most of their decisions in that place in Beaverton, Oregon, but they design around the world. So great question.
And then we could go through the proposal, but so last question, and then we'll quickly go through the proposal, and you could ask additional questions then.
This just follows up on Bill's question about accreditation, and it's really a question coming from my own ignorance, so I apologize. But is that common to have non-accredited degree programs at UO? Are there many such programs now? Are there many such programs in the business school and other colleges? I really don't know.
Well, it will be accredited if you all approve of it and grad council approves of it. We are going to submit this new delivery mode to the Northwest accreditor. So it will be, hopefully, accredited through that. Now, the AACSB, many schools have programs that are not accredited through AACSB because of their unique nature. And so this is one of them.
Okay, thanks. And then if maybe just briefly go through that. And
All right. So I think we've pretty much touched on the program description. If there's any questions about that, feel free to. So as we're going through this, please feel free to raise your hand if questions come up. Again, we're talking about the course of study. It is the same program. It's the same curriculum, and 95% of the teaching, the instruction will be similar across the online or the on-site. We do want to make a point that the on-site is a 15-month program, and the online is a 24-month program, and that is because most of the online students will be working professionals. So we think that that's the speed of that program tailors better to someone who's working a full-time job. I guess going back up into that one, I do want to acknowledge we work very closely with Francis White and the UOCC, and so we will be making sure that these courses, we have a couple of experimental courses that do need to be put through the program, do need to be put through and get their permanent course numbers. That will all be those will be taken care of during round 2 of this upcoming of this current year. And we're working very closely with her and the UOCC committee to make sure that all of our courses are reviewed, that they'll be reviewed as they're offered online after the third offering as per UO policy. So we are equipped for that. Keep going there. This is pretty much covered here. I think we want to make sure that we are utilizing Canvas quite heavily with the use of some additional tools. One is called Panopto, and that is a program that allows us to capture the video, and it also allows some closed captioning so that we're just one element of the requirements, like some ADA requirements that we have to have for online. It also allows us some security issues, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We'll be using OneDrive. Cisco WebEx will be used a lot for group meetings that can take place, for academic advising that would take place with the instructors. And these are all the top of the line products that are available that the leading schools are using for their online programs. And we have our certainly sufficient and high quality video production and studio available for this as well. Robin covered our asynchronous, synchronous, and residencies, I think, fairly well. And again, this area of the proposal just speaks again to our significant use of industry practitioners that is so important to this kind of delivery and for this kind of a market. And we have a list of the professors who are currently teaching this, and I believe we have all of them who have agreed for online instruction. So you can look at those. You can see all. We do have a fair number of tenure track and non-tenure track, as well as some pro tem instructors as well.
And in the appendix, one of the appendices to the proposal, we have brief bios of all of the instructors, so you can see their experience.
There's a lot of faculty. This part was brought up to us as we met with the grad school and the executive committee to make sure that we address the adequacy of the facilities and technology and other resources, and we see the importance of that. So we see that the technology, we are using the best market that is available. Lundquist College has also built a virtual desktop infrastructure that allows all of our students to access the software that we have licenses for, and the students for this online program will have access to that as well. And we'll see as the need for various softwares changes, we can make changes to those fairly. It's fairly agile, so we think that is a real bonus that we'll have for the students of this program. I talked about Panopto. I talked about Camtasia. I didn't talk about Camtasia. That's another one we'll be using for some of our video footage. Students will be logging on to Canvas using their university credentials, so we are relying on the University of Oregon security for that. We'll also be utilizing ProctorU to do any proctoring for any online exams or assignments that take place there. One of the other things that we'll be doing with any of our video content, because we want to discourage piracy of this, because we feel we have a very special program that we want to protect. It will be an asset of UO's that should stay here. All of our footage will be watermarked. Also with the program Panopto, we can make sure that footage, at least to the best of our ability, the best of the ability in the online world, cannot be just downloaded. And we're also asking all of our students to sign an agreement at the beginning of the program stating that these are all copyrighted materials, property of the University of Oregon, and they are not to be using them elsewhere. So we're doing our best that we can with the market. And we know this is something that the entire online education industry is struggling with, because every time you put up a security measure, there's some way to get around it. But we're trying to stay on top of that. Oh, absolutely.
So I'm curious about that intellectual property part of this. So these will be courses that are prepared, using U of O resources and so forth. And so all the course material will be the property of the University of Oregon. And how will the professors be compensated for, preparing these courses, which is obviously a fairly intensive exercise?
So I think, as with most of the course materials, most of the course materials have been already developed for the on-site class. So the instructors are being compensated accordingly. We are compensating them additionally for the conversion of this into their online method. However, this doesn't mean that they themselves own this content, because the content itself was developed through the university. And as per university policy, anything that is developed using significant time or resources does bear the copyright of the university. So we are in accordance with policy with that. The instructors, if this is material that they have developed using the time and resources, they can take it along with them and use it per UO policy anywhere else, as long as they're not being compensated for that. So I think there's some gray area in there, but we will be following UO policy on that.
This is related to your, I think earlier you said in relationship to accreditation that one reason, I don't know if it was a reason, but that the program faculty may not be engaging in research? Is that, you said that the accrediting body requires more research. And I'm wondering, are the faculty, there's nothing that prohibits faculty in sports product management from doing research, right? And then the second thing is, are the faculty that are engaged in the program, they're still going to have to go through the university promotion policies in order to get promoted from rank to rank. So is there an expectation that scholarship is part of the work of the faculty in the program?
So I would say yes, scholarship is a part of this program. The reason that we would not seek the AACSB accreditation would be because the requirement that the faculty be tenured. And so the professors that we're hiring right now are more professors of practice. So they come with a background from the industry. In most cases, they have an MBA rather than a PhD. The professors that we're using in our program that come from LCB, we're supporting their research. So a professor like Dr. Hong Yen, who's a market research professor, we paid into her research last year. We want to make sure that research continues in this area. They were poking me to be the one to speak because obviously I'm researching this in this area as I get my PhD. So we do believe that today we can stand in front of you and say, hey, we can teach in this area, but we want to get in front of this industry and be able to drive this industry from a science and social science standpoint. Are we there today? I would say not quite yet. Are we going to be able to get there? I think yes. And I think as in the future, if the university decides they want tenured faculty up in Portland, then maybe it's a different conversation that we can have. But I think that scholarship is probably the most important thing to our professors and to our program. So, very good question.
Thank you for your presentation. In my field, in architecture, a number of schools that I know of, in fact, a colleague at Arizona, University of Arizona, has taught an online course. It's different than what you're proposing. It's a standalone online course. And he tells me that one of the challenges that he's faced is people dropping out of the course. And so this goes back to what President Schill said about student success. So I wonder if you have any figures about how, once students sign up, do they stay with the program in this sort of program, or is there a high attrition rate, which seems to be the case, at least for these kind of standalone courses?
So I'll speak a little bit to how the program is designed to try to keep attrition from happening, and how we're starting our 4th cohort in the face-to-face program, and it has been successful. We've lost a few students with the face-to-face, but very few. So we start them with a cohort, and we'll do the same thing with this program. So when you start with a group of other people, and you get to know those other people. Then we put you in a creation team. And then we assign you a mentor, and then we assign you a coach to your creation team. And I tell you, these are really sticky things for students, because they see themselves as a part of something bigger than themselves. And I think that when we've seen the attrition rate in other online programs, and yes, we see that same rate, and yes, we're concerned about it as well, because this program works better if people start it and they finish it. And that's why the industry is interested in this program, because they want more qualified people in this industry. They don't want somebody that's taken a couple courses. They want people to understand the entire product creation process. And the only way they can get that is if they come all the way through our program. We also think that we're going to see people, because they see it at Case Western where I go to school, where people will delay themselves. They'll get into a program and then they'll say, okay, I want to slow myself down, and I'm going to come back the following year. So we will have some flexibility in the program, that people will be in a cohort, and if they need to slow down, then they would join the cohort behind them. But it's a great question, and it's something I think a lot of universities are struggling with, because the value that you can get out of this is if you complete it, not if you start it and finish it. And I mean, the online programs that are going on now, you probably many of you may have kids. I have 3 kids that have started online programs, 2 of them finishing it, 1 not. And without that degree, they're not really getting the value that they can get by getting the degree. So we're hoping, obviously, the cohort, we're hoping the mentor, we hope the team, we're hoping the coach, and then just the program design. Once you start creating a product, there's something that very emotional that happens. They get very attached to the product, and they get very attached to each other. So we're hoping that this program is unique in that way, and that we can hold, and attrition will be a smaller number for us.
Thank you.
Senator Wally.
Hi. Hi. Akiko Wally, History of Art and Architecture. I had a couple questions related to the question regarding the international students and the language. From your explanation, it sounds like for the video component, the actual online component, it's okay for students to take without having enough English, for instance, English level. But I was wondering how that would relate to the on-site component when students will be here and conversing on a project.
Yeah, when we originally designed this program, the on-site one, we thought this program would be perfect if we could get 50 students, 25 of them from outside the U.S. and 25 inside the U.S. And that didn't happen because of different things happening with politics in the United States. So we believe the on-site gives us a new opportunity to influence the market around the world. While we think about companies like Nike, the big companies in this industry are located in Asia. Chinlu, which is one of our key partners, 85,000 people work there. And, so we know that the big market here is probably not the market that speaks English today. What we're going to do about it, I think we're going to study it. And this first execution with the 25 that we'll put in this first class, we're not going to have it figured out. But we want to figure it out. Just for example, next week we're offering a footwear workshop in Portland. And we have one person from New Balance that can't hear. So we're bringing in somebody to do sign for the entire 5 days. So I see that we're going to be able to see the different needs of the students and be able to provide opportunities for them to be included. But it's a great question. And it's one where how do the American universities figure this out? Because just speaking English should not be the only reason you can get educated by us.
So may I ask the flip side of it is how to prevent plagiarism and cheating? Because even for face-to-face on-site courses, that's a big problem, particularly for international students who are struggling to just keep up with courses. And online, I would assume, will be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, so I'm going to have Danita, because we've talked about this quite a bit.
Again, we'll have the authentication that is available through these leading programs that we're using for delivery, but also because they're going to be Lundquist and University of Oregon students, that they will be held to the academic standards that we have and the all the measures and the policies that we have against plagiarism and promoting the best academic activity for them, that those are the standards that we'll be holding them to. So I know with online there are additional challenges, and again, this is something that we're learning about along with the rest of the online community in terms of how do you prevent that, because that's a huge question in online right now. So we're going to lean heavily on our university policies. We're going to lean heavily on our technology, and beyond that, we'll hope that the contact that our faculty and that our program leaders have with these students is strong enough that we'll have some indications of when this may be happening, so we can curtail it. But for a lot of it, it will be their own academic integrity that we will have to continue to rely on, just like we do in a lot of other classes.
Thank you for the sharing the in-depth thoughts that have been going through the process of planning out this program. I'm wondering about a specific question that I'm sort of very unfamiliar with, which is the end result of these products and how they become then private patents, I imagine, that can be sold and might make someone a billionaire one day, right? And how we as a public university and many of the resources they are tapping onto to create such a product as an end result become somehow, well, sort of tapped onto for that part of the process, and whether there is any payback to the state, to the public university that we still are, and how does that work? I'm not clear, and I think the Night Campus might also be.
Okay, a really good question. Yeah, so I'll use an example, and then I would say there's more work to be done in this area. So we've graduated 2 classes from sports product management. And we had 4 companies come out of that, and so we could have signed agreements with them that they needed to give us back a certain amount of money once they start making money, but we didn't do that. We asked them to give us, if they make money, that they give us money. And so because we were just starting, it was more informal, to be honest with you. The first company will be sold, and their profit will come directly back to our program as a donation. Now, we can work this differently in the future as we get more companies coming out of this program. But today, we did it, to be honest with you, kind of the way this industry started, with a handshake. So do we need to formalize that process? Yes, absolutely. And we're working with the companies as they come out of our program to do that. There is an understanding that they couldn't have done this without us. And to be honest with you, to get a payback within that first graduating class was 2017. To already be getting money back to our program in that period of time feels pretty good. Because usually what happens is it's going to be a tech transfer. We're going to get a % of the royalties after expenses, and so in 10 years you might see a couple dollars, So we're trying to figure out a way to do this where we allow them to be successful more quickly, and then we allow money to come back to the university. So it's a great question. Oh, yeah. So the interesting, and those that know Oregon really well, this is like bizarre to me, because I'm Oregonian, 4 generations. We did not have startup money for sports and outdoor companies. We had startup money in the state if you wanted to start a timber industry or an IT industry, but we had nothing for sports and outdoor. So our board, we have an industry board that meets 4 times a year. Last year, they said, this is ridiculous. The state's never going to do this. We're going to do it. So our board now has something called the Oregon Sports Angels. And so just like starting up companies, it's not just money, it's smart money. And the interesting part about this industry is that people retire when they're about 45 and 50, and they tend to retire with money. So that money is now going back to help these companies get started up. And then obviously we're the number one benefitor. I mean, we benefit from SPM, we benefit from the Lundquist College of Business, and then we benefit beyond that for the University of Oregon because they prefer companies coming out of the University of Oregon there. And they funded, I think, 2 of our 4 companies that have come out so far. So it's not guaranteed. The company has to have a really compelling business plan to get money from them. So.
This will probably be the last question from Chris.
I'll ask more than the next time it comes up. But anyway, so there's lots of software mentioned. Is some student who uses, say, Linux or Apple computers going to have trouble with this? Or are they going to be able to participate in it just as easily as somebody using Windows?
So this is where our virtual software program at Lundquist comes into place. As long as they have an internet browser, they can log in and use any of the software that will be required by this program. So that's all that's required. So whether you're a Linux user, Microsoft, Apple, that's where you can access any of the needed programs.
So you actually run through the browser and then on the University of Oregon?
Correct. Yep, correct.
Okay, so thank you very much for that very interesting and wide-ranging discussion, which was very educational. So, thanks. Thanks. Okay, so let's see. I want to talk about a few other things. I'll be quick. First is the course evaluation disclaimer language. The course evaluation task force or committee, has almost been appointed. I think we're still 1 member short, and so as soon as that's done, their first assignment will be to work on that disclaimer. So I'm sorry I don't have it yet. Then I want to say a little bit about the admissions and new instructional programs that actually should consist of both. These are 5 policies. You all remember the policy hell that we went through a few years ago. It's not over. And so these are 5 policy changes, revisions, repeals, et cetera, that come to us from the central administration. And since there's no dispute that these are academic, we are going to take these up. We talked a little bit about this in the Senate exec, and so we're going to send the admissions policies at the bottom, the one about the second language requirement, which is a requirement for incoming students, and then there's another policy that is a revision of our admissions policies, And I think we're going to send those. I know we are going to send those to the undergrad council. I think they're meeting tomorrow about those, and they'll come back with a recommendation for us on these. The other ones are pretty straightforward repeals, and I don't think I'm going to take up any more time talking about them. Okay, but there are links there if you want to look at them. Then I want to say a little bit about the time, place, and manner stuff. So I, appreciate President Schultz's comments on this, but my understanding is that the original proposals for time, place, and manner restrictions came as a result of the CO2 divestment student protest, where our students had the world's most peaceful sit-in in Johnson Hall lobby. I believe they've all now graduated with A+ because they spent all the time doing their homework using the Johnson Hall Wi-Fi. And so, that concerned the administration. They had some objections to the sign that the banner that the students put outside. And so they proposed a set of restrictions on the time, place, and manner of free speech activities. And so I just wanted to clarify the reason that this is coming up, okay? I think what I'm going to do with it is take it back to the Senate exec, and we will look at the language in the MU's new procedures and make sure that they're consistent with our university's free speech policies. I'm concerned that these may be used as a model. In fact, I know that they are being proposed to be used as a model for deans who control other parts of university space that is, obviously academic. And so I just want to make sure that we get this right. I'm not, prejudging what is good or bad about this proposed set of procedures. So we'll take it up in the Senate exec and bring it back to you. And then last, I want to ask Frances if she would be willing to give a brief update on the HEC.
Yeah, I discovered that there's a template with raindrops on it, so I decided I would use that to help invoke rain. Oh, thanks. I know it should be raining. So this is the work that I've been doing. This was someone asked me to serve on the foundational curriculum transfer committee. They said it would last maybe a couple of months. We're now a year and a half later, and we're still going. So as I've come back to talk to you at various times, the various the House Bill 2998, which was the starting point of all of this, which was to a requirement that community colleges and universities work together to help students to transfer between community colleges and public universities without what we're now calling excess credit, which was originally called lost credit. That is by taking classes that don't transfer, or to ensure that it was clear to students how best to focus their studies to make that transfer most efficient.
But you actually got them to change, to start using excess credit and drop lost credit?
The press release is right there. Yes, it's excess credit, which, yes. Sometimes one has to just be a little bit stubborn. So what is going on now is that, there's been a certain amount of rebranding, but it's all the same basic principle. So now this is being called a transfer campus. You remember it starts from the HEC convened the various stakeholders that are involved in this, maintaining the faculty control of the curriculum at the various institutions. We came together and developed the foundational curriculum, which is now called the Core Transfer Map under the new Compass thing, which took 2 meetings to make that logo, honestly. Sorry, I'm not the most patient person on these things. Let me go back. So this is basically, we first had developed the foundational curriculum, and then now we're moving into the USTAs. which are the unified statewide transfer agreements that go major by major. So the foundational curriculum is itself only 30 credits, and then the idea is that there would be clarity and agreement on how students that are interested into moving into particular majors, which classes they should be taking. And part of this oversight now committee, which is now called the OTAC, which is the Oregon Transfer Articulation Committee.
You have 1 minute, so please don't spell out all your acronyms.
Oh, gosh. So we went from this, which is all gen eds across all the institutions, to basically going from the principles that last time you saw. This is just an example of ones that are done for social sciences, which we all agree on here. They all now are built into the OTMs and the AAOTs and the ASOTs. There you go. To a basic foundational curriculum that is overseen by the senates of each institution. And then it's now being called the Oregon Transfer Compass, so it's rebranding with this logo. And the USTAs will become major transfer maps, which are basically sort of like lists of courses that you take in one place, and it's agreed upon that they will count for certain things where you're moving into. And these are under development right now. There are 4 areas: biology, English, business, and education are working on them. And then there will be 4 more areas, and 4 more majors will be added every year until everybody is on board with this. And this is then the core transfer map. This is the beginning thing that we did. This is what it looks like now. It hasn't changed fundamentally, but there's sort of some design and how it's done, including the argument between if you have STEM, then the other thing can't be called non-STEM, so it's called general core. So it's all basically the same elements. And next week we will hear the statewide update on how the 4 major transfer maps, that is the USTAs for those 4 areas, are going at the state level. And then we will be starting to select what the next 4 areas will be. So that's basically it. We're now under development on the next lot. Is that fun?
Thank you. I didn't realize there was so much to report on. I would have saved more time for you otherwise. Okay. So with that, are there any notices of motion? Okay. Chris, would you like to? Second. We're adjourned.